Hi, welcome everyone. This is the next video in a series of videos where we're trying to recreate the original Asteroids game, but we haven't really been too accurate with that because that's not the point of what this whole idea is about. Ultimately, what we want to do is take the original game as we have it here and convert it into something more modern and particularly more multiplayer. That's what we set out at the beginning of this series if you were following along. So we're not trying to get an accurate representation. And in actual fact, if you go onto YouTube or on the web in general and search for tutorials, particularly for this game Asteroids, because it's an ideal candidate to replicate for learning, there's plenty of tutorials. Many of them are much, much better than what I've done here. So if you just want to learn how to do that, how to perfect making this game, obviously feel free to have a good scout round, have a look on YouTube at the various videos. There's many out there. I'm not sure how many use the P5 library that we're using, but even so, see what alternatives are out there and see what you can find. But ultimately what we're looking to do once we've made this video is this game is we want to then convert this to a multiplayer version, a massively multiplayer ideally. So really we're just going to tidy up. Maybe hopefully this will be the last video in this series just to finish this game off and get all the basic functionality in place. So let's think about what that is. Well, if we look at our ship excuse me, if we look at our ship, the ship's okay, but we have no collision. See, that asteroid's just gone straight through there and nothing's happened. Now that obviously isn't what happens. The idea is if an asteroid hits the ship, it's killed, you lose a life. So that's something we need to look at. We also need to look at bullets, shots. We have nothing. So on the original game again, the ship shoots shots to try and hit the asteroids. And then the other thing we need to do is when the asteroids are hit, they disintegrate and form smaller asteroids. I think 1 becomes 2 and then 2 become 4, but they get smaller and smaller and then eventually they just disappear. I think they get faster as well actually as they get smaller, just to make it more difficult. So let's just have a look at some of these. This is a video we looked at last time, I think. So if I just, let's make this a little bit bigger and have a watch of this. So this is somebody playing the original game. Let's just see if we can pick up some of the points here we need. So okay, so one shot hits an asteroid and it destroys. Okay. Yeah, becomes a middle size, then 4. So it becomes 2, and then each one of these middle. I just want to see which one the middle size one becomes again. So he's over here. So he goes across the screen. Do his bullets cross across? So 1 becomes 2, and then each one of them becomes 4, was that? Let's have a look. 2. No, it becomes 2. Okay. And then obviously we've got this ship here, but we're not going to deal with that. I just want to see, do his bullets go across the screen? I think they do, don't they? Yeah, I think his bullets go across as well, although it looks as though they do run out as well. So okay, I think we've got enough information to be going getting on with from that video. So we do have a number of things to do. Let's see if we can bottom all ML today. Draw a line under this. I may do like a bonus video at the end just to revert back to the original controls. I was thinking about this, and maybe just for the original version we'll get the left, right and thrust system working rather than the the move about version like this that we've got here. I also definitely need to speed that up as well. That's quite slow. So anyway, let's get started. Let's see what else we need to do here to get this up to speed. Okay, so what should we do first? Well, to be honest, everything's going to be revolve around the shot now. The shot is going to be shot from the ship. It's going to collide with an asteroid, and then an asteroid's going to break up into smaller ones. So really, I suppose at this point, let's get the shot in play, and we can start using that. Okay, so let's have a look. So I think ideally what the best thing to do now would be to create a new class for this. Do we call it shot, bullet, laser, shot? I'll call it shot. It seems as good a class as any. So that's shot.js. And then remember how we created classes. So if I just, what I'll do, I'll just copy this whole bit of code from here. It's easier to do this, copy and paste that. So obviously the first thing we need to do is change the name to shot here. Now let's before we get rid of these, let's think about whether we need these. We'll come back to that in a sec. One thing I do know is that we're just going to use points on the screen, not actual circles or shapes. It's just a point. And because of that, we don't need a radius, because a point is just literally that, a point. So there's no size to it. So I know we're not going to need radius, so that's fine. Position and heading. Well, we're definitely going to need position. We're going to need to know where it is at any given point in time. Heading is an interesting one, because if we go back to the video, if the ship here is pointing this direction, that's the way the bullets come out, and that's the way they continue going until they either hit an asteroid or their lifespan ends. So if you watch this, so this bullet here, for example, was shot when he was pointing in this direction. He's now turned slightly and he's pointing in this direction, so he's shooting there. But this bullet is still going in that direction. So in other words, this bullet, this shot, needs its own heading. It needs its own velocity, effectively. So it's got its position, but from that position, it needs to know which way it's still going while its life is still in existence. So it definitely needs a heading as well. So where are we? So we've got a position, we've got a heading, and I'm just wondering whether that's the best way to do this. Maybe heading isn't the best way. Maybe we could do this another way. I'll tell you what, let's take that out for now. And we know we definitely need position. So when the shot's created, we're going to give it a position. So the position is the XY, as we did with the ship. I think we did the same with the ship, didn't we? Yeah, we give it an initial position. The thing about the shot is, its initial position is going to be where the ship is at the point in time it's created. So we'll know that when we come to create the shot, we can remember that. Let's see. Now, we don't need to do any of this fancy stuff here. In fact, we don't need any angles or anything like that. I think we can get rid of all of that. We certainly don't need a triangle. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to do P5 dot point. It's the simplest drawing thing. It simply draws a point on the screen at the particular point of its position. So that's going to be, the X position is going to be this dot position dot X, this dot. Okay, so we have our show method for now. I'm quite happy with that. I think that'll be fine. The move method. Okay, so let's come back to that in a minute. Let's leave that as a blank just for the minute. I'll just put an empty comment in there so that the formatter doesn't try and cause an error. So we've got our constructor. We set it with an initial position, and when we come to draw the shot, we just draw it at that position. Let's start with that first of all. So we now need to trigger the shot. I've just got a reference thing here for another bit of code on the other screen, just in case I get myself too lost. But I'm still trying to work it out in my head as I go along. So let's see, how can we do this? I think one of the features that P5 comes with is the ability to track the mouse. Now, we saw that, I think it was one of the last videos, I was able to, as I moved the mouse around the screen, it was able to draw a circle that just followed the mouse around the screen, wherever it was. So we have the ability to interact with the mouse. So that's obviously, that's going to be important, because for the purpose of the shot, we're not tracking the position. What we're going to track is the mouse button pressed, and we'll use that for now in this game as a shot. Now, to do that, we have a P5 method called mouse clicked. So let's go up to remember our P5 methods here. These are built-in methods to the P5 library. That these two are called automatically. A couple of others are called automatically as well, but we're not using them. But there's also other methods that it can track, for example, activity on the mouse. So here's one of them. Let's just come under this one here. So we do P5 dot mouse clicked. And bear in mind, by the way, I don't know if I've said this, that these function names are case sensitive, so you know the capital C there for clicked is important, and the rest of it being lowercase is important, so bear that in mind. So that equals a function, okay, and then we're going to do the same as we did here. We're just going to call this dot mouse clicked, and we're going to pass in the P5 library for that. So then in the methods, we're going to create this method, mouse clicked. Let's just copy that. Let's stick it after capture key press. So mouse clicked, we passed in the P5 library, so we capture it here. And then inside the braces, we run the lines that this method is going to do. So what we need to do, we need to get the angle now that the ship is pointing in order to know in which direction to shoot the bullet. So we said that a minute ago, didn't we? If the ship's pointing this way, even though the position is here, we need to know the angle of the bullet to move. Before we do that though, let's just create the shot, because we didn't put the angle in there, didn't we? We've left that out. So let's just create the shot first of all. Okay, so how did we create the ship? This dot ship equals new ship, and then we pass the parameters. So we've got a load of asteroids, but we're probably going to have a lot of shots on the screen as well as we're shooting. So let's create a shots array. Okay, so that's where we can store the shots. That's fine. So we did here with the asteroids, we pushed them onto that array after we created the new object. We pushed it onto the array. Okay, let's see if we can do that down here. So this dot shots dot push, and then inside here we create the new shot object, and we need to pass in some parameters. So for the minute, it's just simply the P5 library, the X and the Y. Well, the P5 library is there, that's been passed in, so we can do that. Now the X and the Y, as we said, is the current position of the ship, because obviously the bullet's going to originate from the ship. So let's we need to get now the ship position. So this dot ship is the ship. So we should be able to say this dot ship dot position dot X, this dot ship dot position dot Y. This dot shot. Oh, okay, it's a different game altogether. This dot ship dot position dot Y. Okay, so now that creates every time we click the button, that will create the shot in the array, but I've got a suspicion that's not going to, oh, it's actually an error. I wasn't expecting the error, but hey ho. Let's have a look here, see if we can find out what's going on. Let's have a look here. So it's the shot. Shot is not defined. Oh, of course, we haven't imported the shot class. We declared it in a file, but we need to reference it in this file here to get to it. If you remember here, we did it with asteroid and ship. So basically, we just need to copy this line. So we go import shot from at classes shot. There we go. Now, do I need to do anything else? No, I think that does it there, but we have errors. So let's have a look. P5 is defined but never used. That's okay. That's because we haven't done anything with the passed in parameters yet. So we need to do something. So where is that? That's in the, oh, okay, that's in the shot class. So let's go to the shot class. So P5XY. Oh, yeah, we've passed in, oh, hang on. We've passed in P5, that's used there. X and Y are used there and there, so that's okay. P5 is defined but never used. Shot line 6. Oh, the move function. Oh, right, okay, yeah. So we've created this move function, but as it stands, we're not doing anything with it. So that's what's causing the error. Let's just comment that out for a minute. Okay, so that's working. We have our ship, and can you see as I'm clicking this here? Okay, so it's reacting to the mouse click. That's a good thing, but obviously it's not happy. So let's see. Okay, so we don't have the error now. Okay, all right, so that's good. But notice that nothing's happening. But what I have realized is that in the draw method, we're not showing the shot. So we're showing the asteroids, we're showing the ship, but we haven't rendered any of the shots. So similar to the asteroids, really, we need to loop over each of the shots in the array. Let's just copy and paste that in there. And let's just change the value of x to something else. I don't think it would matter really because we've finished with it here, but I just like to make sure. Now this is interesting. I've hard coded 10 there, and yet at this point we should know how many asteroids we've got. We know we've got 10. Now this is a programming thing, as in what you call a good practice thing here. We'll just take a moment on this. So here, when we first set up the asteroids, I've hard coded the value 10 here on the code, which means basically x goes from 0 to 9 because counting in computer terms starts at 0. And so 0 to 9 is 10, that's 10 individual items. So basically 10 times we will push a new asteroid object onto the asteroids array. So that gives us 10. But what I've done, which is not good practice, is I've hard coded the value again here when we've come to draw. The reason why that's bad practice is, if for some reason I now want to change the value of the number of asteroids, I have to change it in more than one place. And immediately, that's not good practice. That is not a good thing to do. If you set one of these parameters up and it's used in numerous places, you should not have to change it in numerous places. So in other words, I should only have to change the number of asteroids somewhere once, and anywhere that that's referred to, that will automatically be taken into account. Okay, so this is a practice thing. This obviously worked, but it's not a good idea. So I'm glad I've picked this up because we can just show you how we're going to deal with this. Now there's a number of ways we could do this. We could just hard code it in the first time it's used, which is here, and then we can refer to basically the length of the asteroids array whenever else we come down the page. That's one way of doing it, but I just want to be a little bit more thorough than that. So what I'm going to do is create a two new variables here. Asteroid count, which we'll set to 0, and then shots count, which we'll set to 0. Actually, no, shots count doesn't matter because they get added auto. Oh yeah, no, they don't matter. But asteroid count, but we'll set that to 10 here. So that's our initial value. Then what we do is, rather than hard code the value 10 like we have here, we simply say this dot, I copied the wrong thing, haven't I? This dot, wrong spelling with us. This dot asteroid count. So now we know that the number of asteroids, when we first set up at least, is going to be made to 10, this dot asteroid count. However, this is where it gets even more important. When we come to draw the asteroids, because think about it, in the game, what's going to happen is when we shoot an asteroid, it's going to split into, well, we're going to lose that asteroid, but then 2 more are going to appear. So in effect, if we started off with 10, well, 1's going to go, but then we're going to gain 2. So then, get the right number of thumbs. So that gives us 11. So then the original number of 10 is actually no longer relevant. So we can't hard code that value in. So what we do here, we've already said that that's the initial number of asteroids, and that's fine. Here, what we need to do is simply track the length of the asteroid array. You remember here we push the asteroids on, and every time we lose an asteroid and gain 2, this asteroid array is going to go up in length by 1. So we need to this is really the value we need to track, how many asteroids are in this array. So what we can do here, rather than type the number 10, we can just simply say this dot asteroids dot length. And length, based in an array, basically means the number of items in that array. So if there's 10 asteroids to start with, this number will be 10. But as that value changes as the game plays, and the number goes down and the number goes up, this will only ever draw the number of asteroids that are currently there. It won't be hard coded to a value. So that means that we won't have any errors caused because of that. So that's good. Everything else is fine in that array. But we've got the same issue with the shots. Now, as it happens, the shots array starts empty anyway because we have no bullets on the screen to start. But we're going to put in the mouse clicked, well, we have put in the mouse clicked new shots. So now when we render, we need to do the same thing here. So rather than having a hard coded value, we need to do this dot shots dot length. And then no matter how many shots are in the array, it will always render the right amount. Now we don't need to do this edge for the minute. We'll come back to that in a second. So let's just comment that out. And we didn't have a move function. So at the minute we're just going to call the show method on the shot. And it's this dot shots array, and it's the S element because S is counting up from 0 to the number of shots that we have. Okay. And then so the show method's taken the P5 library. I think that's correct. Show P5. Yeah. Excellent. So we can save that. That'll save fine. Let's just reload the page and hope it all works. Now I'm going to click the button now. So we have no error, but look at that. Can you see the dot there? I'll tell you what, I wasn't expecting that. So let's reload the page. So there's no dot. I'm going to click the button, click. There we have a dot. That is our first shot. So what that means is as we click the button, it's just going to keep drawing the shot in the same place. So now there's a number of shots in that one place. That's good. This is great. We have our shots on the screen now. But obviously we want to make these shots move, don't we? So let's go back to our code. So we have our shot class. Let me just check my reference here. Okay. So the thing with, let's see how we did it with the ship. We had a position and a heading, and then when we moved, we created a velocity value based on the direction we're moving in. Now, this is similar with the shot, but the difference is that at the time the shot is created, we already know what its velocity is going to be because it's preset for the shot. That's not going to change. So we don't need to set it in the move function. We can simply set it at the time that the shot is created. We can create its velocity. So what that means is we can put our velocity value in there, and then in the constructor we can say this dot velocity equals, and what did we do with ship? We created a vector, so similar to the position, P5 create vector, but what is its X and Y? Okay, so this isn't going to work. What we need to do is, do you remember when we did the show on this, we had to get, oh, I haven't plugged in my iPad, never mind. But do you remember we did that thing with polar to Cartesian coordinates where, let's just see if we can find a reference to that. Polar to Cartesian equation. Here we go. I don't know whether this will be the best reference. Here we go. This looks promising. Yeah, there we go. So you remember we said if you've got an origin position here and you have a radius and an angle, then you're going to know where the your ending position is there, right? From this point to this point is the radius, which is this length here, elevated by that angle. However, what we want to do is get how far from this point the x is along the x-axis and how far up the y-axis is, and wherever them 2 points intersect, that's what we want. So we need to get a function that gives us an angle, because then we can create the vector at that point. And by if this shot is set here and we create the vector as a point here, the the shot now knows that that is the direction it needs to travel in. It's got its direction and it's got its magnitude, which is how far along that vector is. So we have we have the angle because we have the ship's angle, so we need to pass that in, because whichever angle the ship's at is the angle the bullet's going to shoot off at. So we already have that angle. The radius, which is going to be the magnitude, well, we can put an arbitrary figure in for that for now. We can tweak that later, but let's look at that in a minute. So once we've got that, we can then use that. Remember, we did that formula for the ship to work out the x and y. So if we remove this here, we got the angle. Now, in the ship, we did it based on the mouse relative to where the ship was, which makes sense, so that the ship turned as we were moving the mouse. So let's just think about this for a sec. So if I click the button here, then I need to get if I click it here, I need to get the angle of the ship first of all. So let's do that. So let's go back to the original here. Mouse clicked. So before we push the shot in, let's get the angle of the ship. So the angle is, it's this a tan 2, isn't it? Remember that? Let's just copy this formula here. Copy that. Okay, so the angle equals a tan 2, and it's the x position is, let's just do the ship position. No, the ship position x is just where the shot's going to be put, so that's not going to make any difference anymore. So what do we want? What are we after? How are we storing the angle in the ship? Heading. Okay. Do I use heading? I don't even use that. Oh, great. So I've got that heading number in there. I don't even use it. Let's get rid of that because that's confusing. Okay. So the show, for the ship, we're moving it, the mouse position minus its current position. So for the shot, it needs to be, let's just think about this for a minute. At the point we click the mouse, so I've got the mouse right above the ship here. So at the point I click the mouse, the ship is pointing towards the mouse, so it is still mouse relevant. Okay, so let's go back to the original script. So in the mouse clicked function, the angle is the mouse minus not this position, because we're not in a class at the minute, so we need to refer to the class, which we know is ship. And p5x minus this ship position x. There we go. So now that angle should be the angle that we want the shot to go in. So let's pass that now as another parameter in the class. So we've got p5 library, ship position x, do you know what? Let's just pass the ship position and we can get the x from that. Let's get rid of that. Ship position, and now we've got angle. So p5 library, ship position, angle. Okay, let's save that. Let's just save that, and let's go to here. So p5 library, let's call this part ship position. Just took a quick break there, but right, let's go back to where we were. I think what we were doing was changing how we pass the parameters into the shot class. So we had p5 library, the ship's position now. So we've combined the x and y into the one parameter. We can get that out in a minute separately. And the angle, which we've determined is where the mouse is, which is right. So now we've got p5, the ship position, and then here we want the angle. So the position is now, the ship position now contains the x and the y. And now, so rather than having them as two separate variables here, we now need to prefix ship position on that one, and on this one as well. So now we're creating the vector based on the current ship position, so the shot originates at the very point where the ship is at that point in time. Great. So what about the angle? Well, you may remember from the ship that the no, it wasn't the ship, was it? We used the create from angle. Did we use that in one of the other classes? We used the from angle. No, I thought that's weird. I thought we used that. Did we use that in Asteroid? From angle. No. Okay. I must have used it somewhere else. Okay. So what we're going to do now is P5 comes with a function called from angle, which means we can create the vector variable here from this angle here, but we need to run it through another function to do that, or instead of this function. However, the problem is that the function that we get from angle isn't available in this P5 library here. It's only available in this one here, this one being the one with the capital P. Now, if you go to the P5 library, because we're doing this in Vue.js as a framework, it's not strictly the same as how you would do it ordinarily. So that's why there's a little bit of a caveat here. If you go to the P5 reference, so all of these things here are on the small p, P5, all of these things are available. But if we get to something like this, where it actually is prefixed with P5 element, P5 graphics, I think there's one called P5 vector, I think is the one we're looking for. Let's just see if we can find that. P5 vector, here we go. Now, so when one of these is prefixed with P5 on here with the small p, in actual fact, based on the way we've created it in our game, in our code, that actually means the large P. Now, I could have swapped all of these around at the beginning, had I have known in advance that might have been a better idea. And I could have had this as a small p, and then I could have had this as the capital P, and maybe that would have simplified things. But either way, we have to get access to the other P5 that's referenced in our code in order to use these P5 dot methods that are in the P5.js framework. So if we click on that P5 dot vector, and is from angle in here? I'm looking for a method called from angle. Yeah, there we go. So makes a new 2D vector from an angle. Let's just see if there's anything on that. Whoa, okay. Okay, so that's basing it on the width of the box, and it's doing a full 360. Okay, I'm not sure, that's not strictly relevant for us here, but if we look at the from angle here, so it's capital, so it'll be capital for us, capital P5 dot vector dot from angle, and then notice that we're passing in a radians angle, not degrees. In fact, in this method, it's converting the degrees that they have in this code to radians to make it work. So we need to get the capital P5 dot vector dot from angle, and then we can pass in the angle that we've passed in to the shot constructor, this angle here. But in order to do that, we need to get the capital P5 in here in order to do it. So this is in the constructor. So when we create the shot in the code, we need to pass in the capital P5 here. But then we have another problem, because this method doesn't have the capital P5 in it either. So can we pass in the capital P5? Can we reference it directly from this method? I don't know. I genuinely haven't got this far yet. So let's see if we can do that. That'll be the easiest way. So P5 has been declared up here, capital P5. So it's in the global scope. Can we access it in this function here? So what I'm going to do is change the constructor order of parameters. I'm going to go small p5, capital P5, and then we'll do ship position and angle. So let's save that. Let's go to shot, small p5, capital P5, ship position, and then angle. So now we've passed in the capital P5 into this constructor method here. So now we can use the capital P5. Remember, it was vector, and then it was from angle, and then we passed in the angle, which is here. Save that, and let's see what happens here. Well, it's compiled, there's no errors. Let's just reload the page. Okay, so if I click, so it's still not moving. If I move the thing, yeah, okay, so it is still firing the shot where the ship is at the time I press the mouse button. So we are getting something here. So what am I missing? So we're setting the velocity. Oh, of course, we're setting the position and the velocity, but we're not applying it. We're not actually moving it. Okay, so let's think about this in actual physics terms. So we have a position. So a shot, a asteroid, is at a position, but in order to move it, we're applying. If we look at the asteroid class here, we apply a velocity, or we work out a velocity. Now, like the shot is going to be, the asteroid, we knew in advance what its velocity was going to be, because that was predetermined. So we can set that up here in the constructor. Now you notice in the asteroid, we simply say every time the move method is called, we're applying the current velocity to the current position. So if the current position is let's get my figure. So if the current position is there and the velocity is that much, then when the method is next called, it's going to be there. So we need to add this velocity to the current position, and if we add it to the position, it moves the position there the next time it's called. And because as we've said, the background redraws completely and then it overlays the new positions, the effect to the user is that that asteroid or shot or ship or whatever it is has moved that amount, that vector amount. So it's the same with our asteroid. We added the velocity to the position, and it's exactly the same with the shot. So we need to create a move method, and in the move method we do this dot position dot add, and we want to add to it this dot velocity. So remember, so that's our current position. I've lost track of it. That's our current position. That's the velocity we apply every time. So we apply this dot velocity to the position. It moves it, draws it. The same happens again the next time around. Moves again, clears it, draws it, and so on and so on. That's how position and velocity are related in this instance. So now we've moved it, but we need to make sure we call this move method as we did with the asteroid as well. So let's have a look in the draw. So notice here when we looped over the asteroids, we ran this move method. So we can do the same here. This is why we commented this out, just so that I could bring it back in. So this dot shots s move, and I don't think we passed anything into the move. No, we didn't, because we're just adding variables that are there, so that's fine. So that's great. That gives us our move method now with no errors. Let me just reload. You'll notice that I reload the page. Ordinarily with Vue.js, when you make a change in the editor, it automatically reloads the page, and you've probably seen it do that. But what I have found is with the P5 graphics library, it doesn't always clear out everything from the previous save, and sometimes some old stuff can still be there, and it can be confusing that it's causing an error that in actual fact it isn't. It's just not totally got rid of the error. So I generally just reload the page anyway manually, even though you'll see it reload. So let's see if this works. If we press shoot, there we go, there you go, there's our shot. Can you see that? It's small, but it is there. If I turn this way, yeah, so let's start clicking madly. Yay! That makes me happy, although it's taken quite a while to get this far. But I'm very pleased with that. Let's see. Let's just tidy this a little bit up then. So first thing we need to do is just make the shot run a little bit faster. The velocity before it's applied to the current position, we can say this dot velocity dot mult, which is short for multiply, and we can multiply by a factor. So let's say 5, for example. Let's try that. Is that saved? Okay. Look at that. Now, I don't know, can't remember how fast it was. It takes about 2 or 3 seconds to cover the width of the screen, doesn't it? So if I, let's go back to let's just move it over here. Do you know what? I'm going to speed up this movement as well. I said I'd probably move it to the old methods anyway, didn't I? 2, 3, 4, 4 seconds. So maybe we could speed it up a little bit more than that. Let's try 7. Let's move it over the edge. Let's see. 1, 2. Oh yeah, that's much faster, isn't it? That to me is much better. Okay, but that movement of the ship is not great. While we're here, I'm going to move that ship, make that a bit faster as well. So let's go into the ship class. We set the velocity in the move method. So I'm going to multiply the velocity out here as well. So velocity dot mult. Let's multiply that by 2, for example. Reload the page. Right, okay. Immediately we have a benefit there. Yes. I'm still not sure. Yeah, I think we might still go back to the old way for this in another video, perhaps. I don't know. But yeah, that's going to be much better to work with. Okay. Right, what can we do next? So we have our shots. Shall we do collision now? Oh no, we need to put edges on the shot. So the shots we learned also go across one side of the screen and then come back in from the other, as the asteroids do. So let's apply an edges method to that. Now, in the multiplayer version, we're going to do a little bit more of something called inheritance, because one of them sort of what's the idea? Methodologies of coding is that you only write something once, even if it's used multiple times. What I'm going to do now is not good practice, but it's just for the sake of finishing off this particular section. So what I'm actually going to do here is copy the whole of this edge method in the asteroid class, and I'm going to put it in the shot class. Now, the only difference is, it is slightly different in that the shot doesn't have a radius. So what we can do is just simply get rid of the references to this dot radius. Yeah, let's get rid of it there. Let's get rid of it there. Let's get rid of it there. There. So is that everything? I think that's all references to radius, because remember we did radiuses because the asteroid had to go, if you remember, the asteroid had to go off the screen. Yeah, it had to go, that was the middle of the asteroid there, but it had to go off the screen completely before it came on the other side. So we needed to know the width of the asteroid, but the shot doesn't have a width, it's just a point, so we don't have to factor that in. However, what we do need to do is pass in this client parameter. So if you remember on asteroid, we passed in client. Let's just check that out here in the code where we did that. So we passed in this dot client. So now we can do the same again. We can say this shots s edge this.client. So we can save that. We can save the shot. Reload the page. Excuse me. Now, so ideally when I shoot this here, it should come right round the other side. Hey, check that. If I go up, it should come from the bottom. Yeah. So I should just be able to do that, and we'll have an infinitely number of shots repeating themselves over and over. So that obviously tells us that we need to put a limit on the shot as well. I'm just going to give it, I don't know, what should we say? Say 1,000 pixels or something like that. So how can we do that? Well, what's going to be the best way to do this? Because I was thinking originally that what we could do was just simply remember where its original point was, which is the point the ship was when we clicked the button. And then as its distance goes away, once it hits a certain distance from that point, we just get rid of it if it hasn't already hit something else like an asteroid. But I've just realised that now that we're running the bullets across the edge, if I fire it here, as soon as the bullet comes over to the other side, it's much further away, and it could theoretically pass the lifespan distance we give us. So that isn't going to work. So what other options have we got here? I think maybe it's a time-based issue then. Maybe number of frames, perhaps, if we only let it run for a number of frames. So we give it a frame count, and then every time it's drawn, every time we run the draw method or the show method, that frame count increments by 1. We add the 1 to it, and when it gets to a certain threshold, it just deletes it. That sounds doable. Shall we try that? Yeah, let's try that. It's not too hard to do. So in the shot, we need to set up a threshold. So we'll call it, let's say, lifespan. And let's just call it 500 frames. I don't know how long that is in time. Let's call it 500. And then we need to create a new method called life. No, actually, we also need to increment. Oh, so we need to keep a threshold, but we also need to keep the current life. So we call that life. Let's call that 0. Let's get rid of this life method for a minute. That'll conflict. So the lifespan is where it's going to. The life is what it currently is. And every time it's shown, then the life gets 1 added to it. Remember this increment operator, the 2 pluses? Basically, it's the same as saying this life. This.life equals this.life plus 1. So we're adding 1 to the original variable. So that's all what this is. So every time that's going to increment. So what we want to check for is that what happens when it gets to 500. Now, I'm wondering whether really this should go into its own method, but for now, do you know what? I'm going to put this in its own method, and you'll see why in a minute. So let's call this. What can we call this? Let's call it. Frames. Should we call it frames? Don't think that'll collide with anything. So let's call it frames, and let's take this and put that in there. Then we can say if this.life is equal to, is greater than or equal to, we should only really check if it's equal to, because it's going to hit up in case for some reason it jumps 2, or maybe we increment it by more than 1 later. Yeah, so we just check if it's more than or equal to, just in case the increment doesn't hit the value exactly, but as soon as it goes over it, we can check that. So we're going to say the life is more than the, what do we call it? The lifespan. So at this point, what we want to do is tell the result of this function as to whether this shot is still valid or not. So what we can say is, if the life of this now has hit the lifespan, we can say return false. Otherwise, we return true. So now frames is going to give us, when we call frames from here, let's just we can do that at the very beginning. So let's do that here. So this dot shots dot frames. Now remember that frames now returns a value. These functions didn't return a value, but this one does. So which means the return value we can assign to a variable here. So we can say let, and we can call it what we want, but I'm just going to call it frames equals this shots s dot frames. So now that we have the frame, this frames now basically is going to equal false or true, depending on whether the lifespan of the shot has been reached. So this is going to be useful to us. And this idea of a method actually returning a value is it's a fundamental part of programming. We haven't really done it much here at the minute because all of the methods we've used generally just do something and then just die out and then we carry on. But here, this method returns back a result. And as I say, this is important. So I'm glad that we're introducing this now. Hopefully it's not too much to take in with everything else. So what can we do with this frames? Well, if the shot's reached its lifespan, we no longer need to show it. We no longer need to have it in the game whatsoever. So we now have an opportunity to remove it from the game. Well, here's the thing. We could say, let's try this. If exclamation mark frames. Now you may be thinking, what does that even mean? Well, we know frames is equal to false or true. Now anything inside an if here has got to evaluate to false or true. That's to get a result. If it's false, this code inside these braces doesn't get run. If it's true, it does get run. Now we know that frames is going to be false or true, so this will evaluate perfectly fine in here and give us a result. Or depending on which one it is, we will run this method or not. But what's with the exclamation mark? Well, what that basically means is negate the result if the opposite is true. So if I said if frames, in other words, if frames equals true, do something. By putting an exclamation mark there, what we're saying is if frames is not true, or basically if it's false. So let's have a look at what frames returns again. This dot life plus plus, so we add one to the life. Then we say if the life has reached the lifespan, we return false. In other words, if it returns false, we need to remove this shot. So that's why I've said if frames, well, if that was true, we wouldn't do anything, we just carry on as normal, but we want to check if it's not true. So if not true, or in other words, to put it another way, if false, we want to get rid of it from the array. And so that's why we have an exclamation point there. Is it point or mark for English? Anyway, exclamation point. Point, isn't it? Yeah. No, mark. Watching too much American TV. Okay, so we need to get rid of it from this array. So we use another method on the shots array here. So what we do is we go this dot shots dot, and then you may get you may get a drop down of options that are actually applicable. If not, don't worry about it. The one we're looking for though is splice, this one here. So this .shots.splice. Now what splice does is, if you've got an array of items, really wish I had my iPad. If you've got an array of items, so let's say we've got 5 items in the array, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. If we've got to 0, 1, 2 and we're evaluating it, and if shot 2 now has expired, then what splice does is it says, okay, at a particular point that we pass into the splice method, remove that element of the array, and also the other parameter we pass in is how many from that array we remove. Okay, so let me write out the method in full. Okay, so that's the method in full. So let's just think about this. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we get to 0, 1, 2. 2 is expired. So we splice that one. Now the reason why we know it's that one is, remember, we're iterating over the shots.length, and we're using this variable s to identify which one of the array element that we're at. So at this shots splice at position s, which in this instance example would be 2, we splice that, but we only get rid of one element, and that's the one here. So what that means is, if that one was a 2, we go 0, 1, 2, and then we get rid of that one and this one, because we're getting rid of 2 elements from that point. If that was 3, it would be 0, 1, 2, but we're getting rid of 3 elements, so we get rid of this one, and this one, and we'd just be left with 0 and 1. But we only want to remove the one we're dealing with in this particular, that multiple one comes in handy for other things, but for now we only really want to get rid of the one that's expired. And that means that we no longer have to deal with that move, check its position or move it or anything like that. It's gone from the array. However, there is a problem. What we can do now is we can say else. In other words, if it is true, true, we said it still exists, is it? Is that what we said? True? Yeah. So the shot can continue. So if it's true, that's fine. We can just treat the shot as normal and carry on. But there's a problem here, and it is a gotcha that sometimes you can get caught out with when you're removing elements from an array. When you're adding them, it's fine. You can continue to use the other methods like push and stuff like that and check for things. But as soon as you splice for something, let's think about this. We're going through the array. So we're going at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? So we get to 0, 1, 2, and we think, this is expired, number 2. We need to get rid of this from the array. We get rid of that from the array, and immediately we're left with 4 items. What happens is the array, can't keep that finger down. I'm going to take this one down. So we'll take 0 out. So we had 1, 2, 3, 4. But because we've now taken this out the array, 1 now becomes 0, because arrays are 0 based. So these all move down a position. So imagine if I said 0 is expired, so we get rid of 0, we go to the end of the loop, we add 1 to it, now we go to position 1. Let's check position 1. That's this one. But that means we haven't evaluated this one, because that's now position 0. It's jumped straight to position 1 because the loop is not concerned that we remove this item from it, because the loop is counting simply the length of the array. And every time, so the loop now is gone up by 1. So instead of starting again at 0, which would be very demanding on the processing, it's not an efficient way to do that just because we've removed an item. But the problem we have is now we've got rid of that one, and the next loop round it's jumping to this one, when in reality it should be jumping to this one because we've just removed that. But it's gone to 1, this is now 0, so this is 1. So you can see the problem. Hopefully you can see the problem. that if getting rid of items in the array this way is going to pose a problem as we're continue to loop through the array. So how do we get around this? There's a very simple technique. We just change slightly, very slightly, how we loop through the array if we're going to remove any items from it. This is the way to do it. So here we go from 0 and we carry on until s is less than the length, or while s is less than the length, because what happens is, I think we explained this before, if s is equal to the length, if the length is 5, and we know it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, so if s becomes 5, well, 0.5 doesn't exist because it's 0 to 4. So while s is less than 5, it's a valid number. So while s is less than the length of the shots array, it's a valid variable to use. So that's why we check that. And then we simply add 1 to it on each loop until it gets to that value. What we do to counter the issue of removing an item is, rather than beginning at 0, we begin here at the topmost end of the array. And instead of counting up, we count down. So in this instance, we'd start at 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Now, why is that an advantage? Well, let's think about this. We start at 4, we go to 3, we get to 2. 2 is expired. So we now remove 2 from the array. Oh man, I can't hold the things up. We now remove 2 from the array. So now, remember, we're going down now. So 3 and 4 have now been replaced to 2 and 3. So we've got 0, 1, 2, 3. But it doesn't matter anymore with 2 and 3 because we've already dealt with them because we came from the higher value. So now we go from 2, which is we've just deleted, to 1. Well, 1 hasn't changed, 0 hasn't changed. And as we go down the array, any items we delete only affect items further up the array, not down the array. So we can carry on as normal to the end of the array, or the beginning of the array, I should say, knowing that the rest of that array is intact as it was and can be used accordingly. So hopefully that's made sense. Going down the array is a safe way of when you want to delete items. So the way we do that is, rather than saying s equals 0, we say, let's just copy that, we set s to be this shots.length. In fact, we set it to -1. So that will be 5 minus 1, if you have 5. So that now equals 4. Then we say, while s is greater than or equal to 0, because remember we're counting down and 0 is now the last item in the list, but because we're counting down, we don't do plus plus, we do, can you guess? Minus minus. People do a typewriter, minus minus. So this is saying s begins now the shots.length array, -1, so if there's 5 shots in the array, it equals 4. While s is greater than or equal to 0, keep taking 1 off s every loop. So the first time round it equals 4, we can deal with that. The end of the loop it becomes 3, the end of the loop it becomes 2, the end of the loop it becomes 1, the end of the loop it becomes 0, the end of that loop it becomes -1. -1 is not greater or equal to 0, so the loop ends, carries on the code after the end of the loop. So hopefully that's made sense. I've tried to explain that out as simply as I can, and it just explains one of the gotchas and how to get around that when we're dealing with removing items from an array. So let's see if this works after all that. So we'll reload the page. So let's fire a shot off to the right. Okay, let's just wait and see what happens. Ah, did you see that? It disappeared. But that was way too long. So let's knock that down to, let's go back to shot. Let's say 100 frames. Okay, let's again, just to be safe, I'm going to reload the page and let's fire this off. Ah, so that didn't even get a full width, did it? Let's just take this to the edge. Shoot from here, see how far it gets. Ah, so what's that, about 2/3? 2/3 the width? probably go a little bit more than that, I think. I don't know. Do you know what? Let's just see what happens. Right, so that's about a full width of the screen. You know what? I don't know if that's accurate, but that looks good enough. If we get any more clarification on that, that'll be fine. Good. Okay, so that's our shots. Well, I was hoping to get a bit more done by this point, really, with the collisions and that, but I think we'll wrap up the video here. What I do want to do, though, is just change the presentation of the asteroids a little bit. It was just something that was bugging me. I want to put the ellipse after the jagged shape. Yeah, but that's it. But I just want to faint it down a bit. Maybe we can give it an opacity. Can we give it an opacity? If I say 50 there, maybe. No, that's not what I wanted. I wanted the lines to show through. I wonder if I set the fill to 0, 0, 0, 50 or 40. Okay. Yeah, okay, that'll do. Let's make the blue a bit brighter now, though. So, let's go back to the original. Yeah, okay, we'll leave it at, no, let's, okay. Yeah, I just wanted to see the full circle, really, just so that we've got something to work with. Okay, so let's see, where are we up to? We've got our ship, we've got the shots, but we've no collision. So, okay, so it is going to be the next video, we'll deal with all the collision. Okay, so we'll call it a quits on this video here. I really wanted to get a bit more done, but anyway, hopefully if you've been following along, you've got your little shooty ship now. And, we're not far off really now. I think definitely one more video just to get all the mechanics in place. So hopefully see you soon on the next video.